In 2018, Jean Grey finally cornered the woman who'd spent 11 issues trying to destroy her, framed her for murder in front of the entire planet, got her hunted, got her hated, and Jean had her. She had a team, she had a plan, and she had every reason in the world to end it right there. What she did instead is the most interesting thing this character has ever done, and I bet almost nobody watching this knows what it was. She didn't kill her, she gave her something, and it worked. And then she got up and went back to finish what she'd been doing before any of it started. Now, you know the other story. Everybody knows the other story. She loses control, destroys a star, kills billions of people, dies on the moon. It's one of the greatest comic stories ever made, and is also the worst day of her life. And it's the only one anybody ever talks about. My 5-year-old can tell you who Phoenix is, anybody who plays Marvel Rivals, but he couldn't tell you who Jean Grey was. And before you feel too good about that, if her name just put a woman on fire in your head, same thing. That's the only picture anybody's ever handed us. I've been reading her for 30 years, and it took me most of that to notice I'd been doing it too. So I want to get you to that 2018 scene. But it won't mean anything until you know what happened to her first. And that starts with something Marvel did in 1986 that I still can't quite believe. So 1963, X-Men issue number 1, Jean shows up as Marvel Girl, and she can move small objects with her mind. That's it. I went back and I read those issues, and it's a little bit rough. She gets grabbed a lot. She's frequently the reason the boys have to go rescue someone. For 13 years, she doesn't drive her own stories. Then, in October of 1976, X-Men number 101, she takes a shuttle down through a solar radiation storm so everybody else lives, and she comes up out of Jamaica Bay as Phoenix. The one who used to get carried out of the room is now the most dangerous person in it, which is why it landed and exactly why they couldn't keep her. Because in 1980, Uncanny X-Men number 129 through 137, Chris Claremont and John Byrne push her, break her, and as Dark Phoenix, she consumes the Dabari sun. Everyone on the planet orbiting it dies. Untold billions, and it's offhand, which is the part that horrifies me. She dies on the moon, the cover of 137 says Phoenix must die, and that wasn't even the ending they wrote. The original had the Shi'ar strip her powers and leave her alive, until Jim Shooter read it and said, you don't get to commit genocide on that scale and walk it off. Except Marvel wanted her back, because they were building a book called X Factor around the original 5 X-Men, and you can't do the original 5 with 4. So in January of 1986, in Fantastic Four number 286, which is not an X-Men comic, which is its own strange detail, the Fantastic Four pull a cocoon out of the bottom of Jamaica Bay. Jean Grey is inside it, and we're told she'd been down there since 1976. The Phoenix Force used her as a lens, made a copy, went off and lived her life, and made her choices and burned that star. The woman on the moon was never her. The idea didn't even come from Byrne. It came from Kurt Busiek, who at that point was just a fan, and Chris Claremont fought hard enough over what the Phoenix Force actually was that Marvel let him and Jackson Guice put uncredited pages into an already finished issue. John Byrne had written it as a malevolent thing that Jean's humanity overcame, and Claremont flipped it so the Phoenix was benign and Jean's own fallibility is what tainted it. Two guys arguing over her soul in the back of somebody else's comic. On paper, it's a rescue. She's innocent, she didn't kill anybody, and then there's that part that I can't get past. When she wakes up, her telepathy is gone, just gone. She's got the telekinesis and nothing else, which is to say, they put her back to the exact power set she had in 1963, and they put her back in the costume, and they gave her back the name. She goes into that cocoon as the most powerful thing in the universe and comes out as Marvel Girl again, holding a story with somebody else's name on it. So that's the version everybody tells. Here's the part that nobody tells you. Jean wakes up in 1986, and the first thing that happens to her isn't cosmic at all. Scott Summers married somebody else, a woman named Madeline Pryor, who has her face. They have a son together. They moved to Alaska. And when Angel called to tell him that Jean was alive, Scott left them and never looked back, which, for the record, made the guy writing X Factor so angry he nearly quit over it. And nobody tells Jean. The whole team knows, and they all sit on it. X Factor issue number 8 from September of 1986 has Louise Simonson come in. Scott and Jean are in the tunnels under the compound in radiation suits, cleaning up after a mission, and they're talking about the marriage. Jean says the generous thing. She says everyone thought she was dead. She'd have wanted him to move on. How could she blame him for that? And then she asks if he has a picture of his wife. He reaches into his uniform and hands her a photo of Madeline holding a baby. And that's how Jean finds out there's a child. Nobody had told her that either. She looks at it and says, "A girl?" And Scott says, "A boy." And she says, she always thought they'd have a girl. That's the line. The whole thing right there, because she isn't talking about Scott and Madeline anymore. She's talking about a future she'd been carrying around that doesn't exist and never did. Then she says Maddie looks a lot like her, and Scott says she should have been her. And Jean takes off her helmet and asks him to please stop torturing them both. Nothing burns, nobody sets a star on fire, and she isn't a saint about it either. A few pages later, she's furious, not at Scott, at the rest of them, for knowing and not telling her. It's the most human she has ever been allowed to be, and it happens 8 issues into a book most people have never read. Now let's jump forward, February 2018. Tom Taylor and Mahmoud Asrar launch X-Men Red, and Jean isn't bonded to the Phoenix in it at all. What she does is walk into the United Nations and ask them to recognize mutants as a nation. That's the opening move, not a fight, a proposal. She gets Black Panther and Namor to back it. She's specific about why, too. She brings up Genosha, she brings up Utopia, and she points out every previous attempt at a mutant homeland mostly made it easier to find them and kill them. And the ambassador from the UK stands up and asks the obvious question, which is, "You're the most powerful telepath alive. How would we ever know you weren't just making us vote your way?" Jean answers it. It looks like the proposal is going to pass. Then, outside the building, that same ambassador's head explodes in front of everybody. That was Cassandra Nova, who had been riding the ambassador the whole time, and she timed it exactly so it would look like Jean had used her powers to erase the one person who pushed back on her. It worked. Jean and her team get labeled terrorists internationally, and the human-mutant relations fall apart. And it works because of Dark Phoenix. That's the part that I keep turning over in my head. The retcon never made it out of the comics. Everyone in the world still believes she's the woman who burned a star. So when a frame job needs somebody who'd killed an obstacle, she's the obvious fit. She is still paying for the thing the story itself says she didn't do. So back to where we started. Nova spends the run escalating. She's got these things called Sentinites, nanomachine sentinels too small to see, that burrow into a person's head and make them hate. That's what killed the ambassador. It's also what made an ordinary man named David Bushel pick up a gun and shoot a mutant girl. She seeds riots. She turns Rachel, Jean's daughter from another timeline, because comics, against her. By the finale, Jean has pulled in not just her own team, but basically the entire superhuman community. And the plan everybody can see is Magneto's helmet, thousands of them. So Nova can't get inside anyone's head. That's the decoy. The real plan is that they teleport Gabby Kinney's hand directly into Cassandra Nova's skull and leave something in there. One of Nova's own Sentinites reprogrammed by a technopath named Trinary. Nova built those machines to spread hate. They turned one around. And what it does is let Cassandra Nova feel empathy. For the first time in her existence, she's instantly completely wrecked by it, in tears, and Jean tells her she'll help her atone. And that's more than just a nice gesture. Jean's read on her is that when Xavier beat her the first time, Nova had to rebuild herself from almost nothing, and she put herself back together wrong. The piece she left out is the one they just gave her, which means Jean isn't forgiving a monster. She's looking at somebody who's been a victim of her own missing part for her entire life and fixing it. Then she goes back to the United Nations and finishes her speech. I would put that storyline right there up against the Dark Phoenix saga. I don't think that's a wild thing to say. The famous one is the masterpiece, and it's also the story of the worst thing she's ever done. This one is a woman handed every reason to burn it all down, who works out what's actually broken in the person doing it to her and fixes it instead. If you want to actually read them, X Factor and X-Men Red is where to start. Which issues matter? I put a guide together on Patreon, links below. But wait, there's more. In 2024, Marvel put out a book by Stephanie Phillips and Alessandro Miracolo. 15 issues, and they called it Phoenix. Her name isn't even on the cover. When I first noticed that, I took it as the last insult. 40 years after they took the story, they won't even put her name on the thing. I've come around about it. I love Stephanie Phillips as a writer, but you can only be robbed of something you own. And somewhere between a cocoon at the bottom of Jamaica Bay and a podium at the United Nations, Jean took it back. My son knows her as Phoenix. He'll get to Jean Grey eventually. Everybody does. And when he does, I want the picture in his head to be the one where somebody hands her every reason to burn it all down and she works out what's broken in them instead. She's got fire. She's had fire since 1976, and nobody's taking it off her. I just like her to be known for the day she didn't need it.